Some houses look expensive. This one looked dangerous. The Uber dropped me at the top of a winding hill 30 minutes outside Manhattan, just after 8 p.m., and for a second, I honestly thought the driver had the wrong address. The mansion sitting behind the iron gates didn't look like the kind of place people rented for parties. It looked like the kind of place people disappeared inside. Rain tapped softly against the passenger window while golden lights glowed through rows of towering glass windows overlooking the city below. Black SUVs lined the circular driveway like silent guards, their headlights cutting through the fog rolling over the hill. The driver glanced nervously toward the gate before looking back at me in the mirror. "You working the party?" he asked. I tightened my fingers around the strap of my small purse and nodded once. "Yeah, last-minute catering shift." He let out a quiet laugh, but there wasn't anything funny in it. People don't usually get invited there twice. Before I could ask what that meant, he popped the trunk and drove away the second my shoes hit the wet pavement. Great. I stood there under the cold October drizzle adjusting the sleeves of my black catering uniform while trying not to think about how badly I needed tonight's paycheck. My landlord had taped another overdue notice to my apartment door that morning. My nursing textbooks were 3 months overdue at the campus bookstore, and my mom's physical therapy bill sat unopened on my kitchen counter because I already knew I couldn't afford it. So when Madison from the catering agency called saying they needed an extra waitress for some Billionaire's private event paying double rate in cash, I said yes before she finished the sentence. Even now, staring up at the massive estate with rain soaking through my flats, I told myself this was just another job. Smile. Carry drinks. Keep your head down. Leave with money. Simple. The gates opened before I reached them. No buzzer. No security check. Just a slow metallic groan that made my stomach tighten for reasons I couldn't explain. 2 men in dark suits stood near the entrance beneath the stone archway. Tall, broad shoulders, earpieces visible beneath neatly trimmed dark hair. Not security guards hired off Craigslist. Real security, the kind that noticed everything. One of them opened the front door before I even spoke. Warm air wrapped around me instantly, carrying the scent of expensive cologne, polished wood, and champagne. The inside of the mansion looked unreal. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead like frozen lightning, while soft piano music drifted through the massive marble foyer. Women in designer gowns floated through the room, holding crystal glasses. Men in tailored suits spoke quietly beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, glowing in the distance. I suddenly became painfully aware of my wet shoes and the fact that my entire bank account had less than $80 in it. A stressed-looking event manager hurried toward me holding a clipboard against her chest. "You're Chloe, right?" "Thank God." She shoved a silver tray into my hands before I could answer. "Rules are simple. Stay professional. Don't bother the guests. And whatever happens tonight, you didn't hear it, see it, or repeat it." I blinked. "Excuse me." But she was already walking away. My chest tightened slightly as I stepped deeper into the ballroom, balancing champagne flutes between trembling fingers. Something about the house felt off. Not loud, not chaotic. Worse, controlled. Like every person inside was pretending to relax while silently waiting for someone else to make the wrong move. I tried focusing on my job instead. Smile politely. Offer drinks. Keep moving. But halfway across the ballroom, I felt it. That strange prickling sensation crawling across the back of my neck. Like someone was watching me. Not casually. Intently. I glanced around the crowded room once. Twice. Nothing. Just wealthy strangers laughing beneath golden lights. But the feeling didn't disappear. If anything, it got stronger. Slowly, I looked upward toward the second-floor balcony overlooking the party below. And that's when I saw him. A tall man dressed entirely in black stood behind the glass railing above the ballroom, one hand resting loosely in his pocket while the city lights burned behind him. He wasn't talking to anyone, wasn't drinking, wasn't moving at all. He was just watching me. Even from across the room, his stare felt heavy enough to stop my breathing. Cold gray eyes locked onto mine with terrifying focus, like he'd been standing there long before I arrived, like he'd been waiting for me specifically. Then, without looking away, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. And somehow, that scared me more than if he'd frowned. I looked away first. I do not know why that bothered me so much, but it did. Maybe because something about him felt impossible to ignore. Or maybe because the second our eyes met, the entire room suddenly felt smaller. I forced myself to keep moving through the ballroom, balancing the silver tray carefully while conversations swirled around me in soft, expensive laughter. Crystal glasses clinked beneath the chandeliers. A jazz pianist played somewhere near the back terrace. The air smelled like whiskey, perfume, and money. Too much money. Every guest inside that mansion looked polished in a way I would never understand. Women wore diamonds that flashed beneath golden light every time they lifted their champagne glasses. Men spoke quietly about investment firms, political campaigns, and private islands like they were discussing grocery lists. Meanwhile, I was mentally calculating whether the cash from tonight would cover my electric bill or my mother's medication first. Table near the fireplace needs another bottle. A voice snapped beside me. I nearly jumped. A blonde waitress around my age stood there adjusting the sleeve of her uniform while eyeing me carefully. "You are new. Is it that obvious?" I asked quietly. She gave me a quick look before leaning slightly closer. "Just do yourself a favor tonight." Her voice dropped lower. "Do not talk to the guests unless they speak first." I nodded once. "Okay." But she still did not walk away. Instead, her eyes flickered briefly upward toward the second-floor balcony. Toward him. "And if he keeps looking at you," she hesitated. "That is usually not a good sign." My stomach tightened. "Who is he?" The girl blinked at me like I had asked something ridiculous. Then she laughed once under her breath. Not amused. Nervous. "You seriously do not know where you are?" Before I could answer, someone across the room called her name, and she disappeared back into the crowd. I stood there for a second, gripping the tray tighter, while cold unease slowly settled beneath my ribs. I told myself I was overthinking this. Rich people loved creating drama around other rich people. That was all. But when I risked another glance upstairs, the balcony was empty. He was gone. Somehow, that felt worse. I moved toward the grand staircase, carrying fresh champagne glasses while trying to ignore the strange pressure building in my chest. The mansion stretched endlessly in every direction. Dark hallways. Massive oil paintings in gold frames. White marble floors polished so perfectly they reflected the chandelier light like water. Every corner looked beautiful in a way that felt untouchable. Controlled. Halfway across the ballroom, a man stepped directly into my path. Mid-40s maybe. Expensive navy suit. Slightly flushed face from too much alcohol. "Another drink," he said, taking a glass from my tray before his eyes dragged slowly over me. I instantly hated the look. "You catering girls always this quiet?" I forced a polite smile. "Just trying to do my job, sir." That accent. He tilted his head slightly. "Brooklyn. Queens. Cute." I shifted the tray, already trying to move around him politely, but his hand suddenly touched my wrist lightly. Not enough to hurt, just enough to stop me. My entire body stiffened anyway. "Relax," he said with a laugh. "I am being friendly." The room suddenly felt too warm, too loud. I pulled my hand back carefully. "Excuse me." I managed 2 steps before a deep voice cut through the noise behind me. I think she already did. The temperature in the room changed instantly. Not dramatically, quietly, like everyone nearby stopped breathing at the exact same time. I turned slowly. He stood only a few feet away now. Black suit perfectly tailored across broad shoulders. One hand resting loosely in his pocket. Calm gray eyes fixed directly on the man behind me. Up close, he looked even more dangerous somehow. Not because he was loud, because he was not. The older man immediately straightened. "Vincent," he said quickly, forcing a smile that looked painful. "I was just talking." Vincent Moretti did not even glance at him. His eyes stayed on me instead. Steady. Unreadable. Was she uncomfortable? My throat tightened unexpectedly because he was not asking the other man. He was asking me. Nobody had looked at me like that in a long time. Like my answer actually mattered. The older man laughed nervously. "Come on." It was harmless. Vincent finally looked at him then. Just one glance. Cold. Controlled. Deadly quiet. "I was not talking to you." Silence swallowed the space around us. Somewhere behind me, a champagne glass shattered against marble. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And for the first time since arriving at the mansion, I realized every person in that room was afraid of Vincent Moretti. The older man stepped back immediately. Not arguing. Not even pretending anymore. He adjusted his cuff nervously without looking directly at Vincent. "My mistake," he muttered before disappearing quickly into the crowd like he suddenly remembered somewhere else to be. Vincent watched him leave without expression. Then his attention shifted back to me. I realized two terrifying things at once. First, he had not moved aside to let me leave. Second, I had forgotten how to breathe normally. Up close, Vincent Moretti looked less like a businessman and more like the kind of man newspapers carefully avoided naming directly. Early 30s maybe. Dark hair brushed neatly away from a sharp face that belonged in expensive magazines, except magazines could never capture the heaviness in his eyes. Cold gray. Steady. The kind of eyes that noticed everything. I tightened my grip on the silver tray, suddenly aware of how small I felt standing in front of him. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. The question surprised me more than anything else tonight. Not because of the words. Because he sounded sincere. I swallowed once. Yes. His gaze lingered on me for another second like he was deciding whether to believe that answer. "What is your name?" "Chloe." I immediately regretted answering so fast. Something about him made honesty feel automatic. Dangerous, but automatic. "Chloe." He repeated slowly, like testing how it sounded. My name suddenly felt different coming from him. He glanced briefly at the tray in my hands. "You are not drinking water." I blinked. "Excuse me. You have been carrying champagne for almost an hour." His eyes flicked toward the untouched glass of water sitting alone near the edge of the tray. "But you keep reaching for that instead." Heat rushed into my face because he was right. I had been too nervous to notice I was doing it. I guess I forgot. The corner of his mouth moved slightly again. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter. People usually forget to breathe around me first. I stared at him before I could stop myself. Then, unexpectedly, a soft laugh escaped my throat. Small. Nervous. Real. Vincent's expression changed almost instantly when he heard it. Not softer exactly. More focused. Like the sound mattered to him for reasons I did not understand. The ballroom noise returned around us slowly. Conversations resumed. Music drifted through the mansion again. But something still felt strange. Every person nearby kept glancing toward Vincent carefully without appearing obvious about it. Watching him. Measuring his mood. A woman in a silver dress approached cautiously, holding a champagne flute near her chest. "Vincent," she said softly, "Senator Whitmore is asking for you upstairs." He did not look at her immediately. His attention stayed on me another second before he finally nodded once. "In a minute." The woman's eyes flickered toward me briefly. Curious. Confused. Then she walked away. I shifted awkwardly beneath the weight of the attention gathering around us. I should get back to work. "You are working." His voice stayed calm. Controlled. I just interrupted it. I could not explain why that answer unsettled me so much. Maybe because it sounded less like an apology and more like a fact. Somewhere near the terrace, thunder rolled softly across the hills outside. Rain streaked against the towering windows overlooking Manhattan below. Vincent glanced toward the storm briefly before speaking again. "Who hired you tonight?" "Madison Catering." "Last-minute shift?" I frowned slightly. "How did you know that?" "Because your shoes are soaked." His eyes dropped briefly toward my black flats before returning to mine. The regular staff use the underground entrance during weather like this. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Nobody noticed details like that about me. Nobody cared enough to. Vincent did. And somehow that felt more dangerous than the entire mansion. A sharp voice suddenly crackled through an earpiece worn by one of the guards near the staircase. I saw the man stiffen instantly before walking quickly toward Vincent. He leaned down slightly, speaking low enough that I could not hear the words. But I saw Vincent's entire expression change. The warmth disappeared first, then the calm. His jaw tightened almost invisibly while his eyes turned cold again. Not angry. Worse. Controlled. The guard stepped back immediately afterward. Vincent stayed silent for 2 long seconds before looking at me again. "Stay inside the ballroom tonight, Chloe." My stomach tightened. "Why?" His gaze held mine steadily. "Because some people in this house are not as harmless as they pretend to be." Before I could answer, he turned and walked toward the grand staircase without another word. Every guest nearby instinctively moved aside as he passed. And for some reason I could not explain, watching him disappear upstairs felt a little like watching the lights go out. I tried focusing on work after Vincent disappeared upstairs. Really tried. I carried trays through the ballroom. Refilled champagne. Smiled politely when guests barely looked at me long enough to remember I existed. But my mind kept drifting back to the way his voice sounded when he told me to stay inside the ballroom. Calm. Controlled. serious enough that my chest still felt tight 20 minutes later. Outside, the storm had grown heavier. Rain streaked violently against the giant windows while distant thunder rolled across the hills surrounding the estate. The mansion somehow felt quieter now despite the music and conversation. Like tension had slipped beneath the surface of the party and settled there unnoticed by everyone except me. I was heading toward the terrace with a fresh tray of drinks when I heard raised voices behind one of the partially closed doors near the west hallway. Not shouting exactly. Sharp. Urgent. I slowed instinctively. This deal should have been finalized weeks ago. A man's voice. Older. Irritated. Vincent is being cautious. Another voice answered calmly. He is being paranoid. Silence followed. Then someone spoke lower this time. After Chicago, he has every reason to be. My stomach tightened immediately because I knew two things at once. First, I absolutely should not be standing there listening. Second, every instinct in my body told me to walk away right now. But before I could move, the ballroom behind me erupted into sudden applause. I jumped slightly, losing my balance for half a second. One champagne flute slipped from the tray. Then another. Crystal shattered across the white marble floor with a sound sharp enough to silence half the room instantly. My heart stopped. Oh no, I am so sorry. I whispered immediately, crouching down beside the broken glass while heat rushed into my face. Conversations around me faded into uncomfortable silence. I could feel people staring, watching, judging. One of the event managers hurried toward me looking horrified while another waitress rushed over with napkins. Careful, someone muttered nearby. The floor. My hands shook slightly as I reached for one of the larger pieces of crystal. Then a shadow fell across the marble beside me. The room changed again. I felt it before I even looked up. Vincent. He stood beside the broken glass, staring not at me, but toward the hallway door I had accidentally stopped near moments earlier. His expression was unreadable, cold enough to make the air feel heavier. Slowly, his eyes moved back to me, down to my trembling hands. Do not touch that. His voice was quiet, but every person nearby immediately froze. I pulled my hand back instantly. One of the security men appeared beside him almost immediately and began clearing the shattered crystal from the floor. Vincent still did not move. His attention stayed entirely on me. Are you hurt? I blinked quickly. No, show me your hand. The request caught me off guard. I am fine. Chloe. The way he said my name made refusing feel impossible. Slowly, I held out my right hand. His fingers wrapped gently around my wrist as he inspected my palm beneath the chandelier light. Warm, steady, controlled. My pulse betrayed me instantly. I could feel it racing beneath his touch. Vincent noticed too. Of course he noticed. His thumb rested briefly against the inside of my wrist before his eyes lifted to mine again. You are shaking. I swallowed hard. I dropped a tray in front of 200 rich people. Something unreadable flickered briefly across his face. Almost amusement. Almost concern. That is not why. Before I could answer, footsteps approached quickly behind him. The same guard from earlier leaned down again, speaking quietly into Vincent's ear. This time I caught one sentence. They are asking if the waitress heard anything. Every drop of blood in my body seemed to turn cold at once. Vincent's expression never changed. Not even slightly. But his hand tightened almost imperceptibly around my wrist before releasing it. Then he looked directly at the men standing near the hallway door. Older, wealthy, nervous, watching me too carefully now. Vincent's voice stayed calm when he finally spoke. The party is over for tonight. Confused murmurs spread instantly through the ballroom. Guests exchanged uncertain looks while security quietly began moving toward exits. Nobody argued. Nobody questioned him. They just obeyed. Because when Vincent Moretti spoke, people listened. His eyes returned to me one final time. You are staying here tonight. My breath caught instantly. What? It is not safe for you to leave anymore. The words hit me harder than they should have. Not safe. My brain repeated them automatically while the ballroom dissolved into controlled chaos around us. Guests gathered their coats. Security quietly guided people toward exits. Expensive heels clicked rapidly across marble floors while nervous conversations filled the air in hushed whispers. But Vincent stayed perfectly calm beside me. Like ending a party for hundreds of wealthy people in under 3 minutes was completely normal. I think there has been some misunderstanding, I said carefully, lowering my voice. I just work for the catering company. Vincent's eyes stayed on mine. I know. Then why can I not leave? Because certain people believe you overheard something tonight. My stomach tightened instantly. I did not. That does not matter. The answer came too fast. Too honest. Thunder shook the windows again as rain hammered harder against the mansion outside. I glanced toward the massive front doors instinctively, suddenly desperate to leave this place. To get back to my tiny apartment in Queens with the leaking sink and noisy radiator and overdue bills. Problems I understood. This mansion felt like a different planet. A dangerous one. I appreciate the concern, I said carefully, but I really should go home. Vincent studied me quietly for a second before speaking again. Do you think you can safely walk out those doors right now? I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped, because the truth was, I did not know. The men near the hallway had been staring at me earlier, watching me, measuring me, and whatever Vincent had heard from his guard had changed something instantly. He saw the hesitation on my face immediately. Exactly. I crossed my arms tightly against myself. So what happens now? You stay here tonight. In this house? Yes. With you? Something almost amused flickered behind his cold eyes again. You say that like I am the dangerous part. Before I could answer, an older woman approached us carrying a folded black umbrella against her chest. Elegant silver hair. Sharp posture. The same woman who had spoken to Vincent earlier upstairs. Everything is prepared, she said softly to him before finally looking at me properly. Her gaze lingered briefly on my soaked sleeves and cheap shoes. Not judgmental. Assessing. This is Chloe, Vincent said calmly. She will be staying overnight. The woman nodded once. Of course. Somehow that was worse than surprise. Like nobody questioned Vincent Moretti. Ever. This is Evelyn, Vincent said to me. She manages the estate. Estate. Not house. Of course. Evelyn offered me a small, reassuring smile. You must be freezing, dear. I suddenly realized I was. Adrenaline had hidden it until now, but my clothes were still damp from the rain outside, and the ballroom felt colder with half the guests already gone. Vincent noticed immediately. Again, his eyes moved briefly over my shivering hands before he slipped off his black suit jacket without hesitation. Vincent, I started automatically. Take it. I am okay. Chloe. Just my name. Quiet. Firm. Impossible to argue with. Slowly, I accepted the jacket from him. The fabric felt expensive beneath my fingers. Warm from his body heat. It smelled faintly like cedarwood and clean cologne. Comforting in a way I absolutely did not want to think about. Vincent watched carefully while I slid it over my shoulders. The sleeves hung past my hand slightly. Something about that seemed to satisfy him because the tension in his jaw eased almost invisibly afterward. Come with me, Evelyn said gently. I will show you to one of the guest rooms. I hesitated. My phone. Vincent immediately reached into his pocket and held it out toward me. I stared for a second before realizing it was mine. You dropped it near the hallway earlier. His fingers brushed mine briefly as I took it back. Warm again. Steady again. My pulse betrayed me immediately. Vincent noticed. Again. Of course he did. His gaze held mine for one dangerously quiet second before he stepped back slightly. Get some rest tonight, Chloe. And tomorrow? I asked softly before I could stop myself. Something unreadable crossed his face then. Not cold. Not distant. Worse. Personal. Tomorrow, Vincent said quietly. We figure out why someone at my party is suddenly interested in a waitress from Queens. Evelyn led me through the mansion in complete silence except for the soft clicking of her heels against marble floors. The deeper we walked into the estate, the more unreal the place felt. Endless hallways lined with dark paintings. Massive windows overlooking rain-covered hills. Antique chandeliers casting warm golden light across polished wood and black stone. Everything inside the house looked expensive enough to belong in a museum, but somehow none of it felt comfortable. Beautiful, yes. Safe, no. I kept Vincent's jacket wrapped tightly around myself as we walked, partly because I was cold and partly because it still felt strangely grounding. The warmth had faded from the fabric by now, but the scent remained. Cedarwood. Clean cologne. Something darker underneath I could not place. This wing is quieter, Evelyn said softly while turning down another hallway. Mr. Moretti prefers privacy. Does he always bring stranded waitresses home after parties? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Evelyn glanced back at me with something suspiciously close to amusement. No, that somehow unsettled me more. She stopped outside a large dark wooden door near the end of the hallway. You may lock this from the inside if it makes you feel more comfortable. The fact that she offered before I asked made me pause. Thank you. Evelyn opened the door gently. The guest room looked larger than my entire apartment. Soft cream-colored walls. A fireplace glowing quietly near the windows. Fresh white linen spread across a massive bed overlooking the storm outside. There was even a tray waiting near the sofa with tea, bottled water, and fresh fruit arranged neatly beside folded towels. I stared at it for a second in disbelief. Someone prepared this already? Mr. Moretti did. My eyes lifted immediately. He what? Evelyn adjusted the silver bracelet on her wrist calmly. He asked us to make sure you were comfortable. Comfortable. Right. Because nothing about tonight felt remotely normal anymore. I stepped further into the room slowly while Evelyn moved toward the dresser. There are clothes in the bathroom if you wish to change out of the wet uniform. Whose clothes? New ones. Of course. My throat tightened slightly. I cannot afford whatever this is costing. Evelyn's expression softened for the first time all night. Mr. Moretti is not worried about the cost. That was exactly what worried me. She moved toward the door again before pausing. One more thing. I looked up. Please do not wander the house tonight. The words instantly sharpened the tension in my chest again. Why? Evelyn hesitated briefly. Some areas of the estate are restricted. Restricted how? Her eyes held mine steadily. Enough that I strongly recommend staying in this room until morning. Then she left quietly, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I stood frozen for several seconds listening to the storm outside. Rain hammered against the windows while distant thunder rolled across the hills again. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, I thought I heard voices. Low. Serious. Then silence. I should have slept. Any normal person would have locked the door, changed clothes, and tried pretending tonight never happened. Instead, I walked slowly toward the giant windows overlooking the property below. Black SUVs still sat near the circular driveway beneath the ring. Security guards moved quietly through the grounds with umbrellas and earpieces. Nobody relaxed here. Not really. My phone buzzed suddenly in my hand, nearly making me jump. Mom. Guilt hit instantly. I had completely forgotten to call her back after work. I answered quickly, lowering my voice. Hey. Chloe? Honey, it is almost midnight. Her tired voice carried through the speaker softly. Are you all right? I looked around the enormous guest room again. The fireplace. The storm. The mansion belonging to a man half of Manhattan apparently feared. Yeah, I lied automatically. Just working late. You sound strange. I am tired. Another small silence. Then softer. Did you eat tonight? My chest tightened painfully because that was such a mom question. Even now. Even with her own health falling apart. I will, I whispered. I promise. After we hung up, the room somehow felt even quieter. Lonelier. I moved toward the bathroom to change clothes, but halfway there, something outside the room caught my attention. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Stopping directly outside my door. My entire body went still. Silence followed for 2 long seconds. Then a low male voice spoke quietly through the other side of the door. Open it, Chloe. Vincent. I should not have opened the door. Every instinct I had told me that. Normal people did not answer their doors at midnight inside isolated mansions owned by men everyone seemed afraid of. But the thing about Vincent Moretti was that refusing him did not feel simple. It felt impossible. Slowly, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. Vincent stood there alone beneath the warm hallway lights, one hand resting casually in his pocket while rainwater still darkened the shoulders of his black dress shirt slightly. He had removed the suit jacket earlier, the one I was still wearing. Somehow that felt strangely intimate in a way I did not want to think about too hard. His gray eyes moved over me carefully the second the door opened. Not intrusive. Assessing. You should be asleep, he said quietly. I crossed my arms instinctively. You told me not to leave the room. You did not say anything about sleeping. Something almost resembling approval flickered briefly across his face. Fair point. Silence settled between us for a second while thunder rolled outside again. Up close, he looked tired now. Not physically exactly. Heavier somehow. Like carrying the weight of the entire house on his shoulders had finally started catching up to him. Can I come in? He asked. The fact that he asked instead of simply walking in caught me off guard enough that I stepped aside automatically. Vincent entered quietly, his eyes scanning the room once before landing on the untouched tea near the fireplace. You did not eat. I was not hungry. Another lie. I frowned slightly. Do you always talk to people like you already know them? Vincent looked at me steadily. Not people. My pulse stumbled at the answer. He noticed immediately. Of course he did. He moved toward the windows overlooking the storm while I stayed near the door, gripping the edge of his jacket tighter around myself. Outside, lightning flashed briefly across the hills surrounding the estate. Vincent stared into the rain for a long moment before speaking again. You are wondering what kind of place this is. It was not a question. Honestly, I said quietly. I am trying not to. A soft breath escaped him. Almost a laugh. Smart. He turned slightly then, leaning one shoulder against the window frame. The men you overheard tonight were discussing business that attracts dangerous attention. I told you I did not hear anything. I believe you. Then why am I still here? His expression darkened slightly. Because they do not. Silence again. The fireplace crackled softly nearby while rain streaked against the giant windows. I studied him carefully for the first time without the chaos of the party surrounding us. Vincent carried himself like someone permanently in control. Every movement precise. Every word measured. But there was something else underneath it tonight. Exhaustion maybe. Or loneliness. Something quieter than power. Are you scared of me? He asked suddenly. The directness of the question caught me completely off guard. I hesitated too long. Vincent noticed that too. Honest answer, he said calmly. A little. He nodded once like he appreciated the truth. Good. My eyebrows lifted immediately. Good. Fear keeps people alert. That is not exactly comforting. Another flicker of amusement touched his face. Brief. Gone almost instantly. Then his attention shifted toward the hallway behind me. The change happened so fast I barely caught it. His entire posture sharpened subtly. Listening. Focused. I heard it a second later. Footsteps somewhere farther down the corridor. Male voices. Quiet but approaching. Vincent moved away from the windows immediately. Lock your door after I leave. My chest tightened again. What is happening? Nothing you need to worry about. That answer usually means the opposite. For a second, his eyes held mine with something dangerously close to admiration. Then he stepped closer unexpectedly. Not enough to frighten me. Just enough that I could see the silver flecks hidden inside his gray eyes beneath the warm light. You notice too much, he said quietly. My breath caught slightly. Maybe everyone else notices too little. Something shifted in his expression at that. Something personal. Before I could understand it, the voices outside grew closer. Vincent stepped back instantly, the walls sliding back into place around him again. Cold. Controlled. Untouchable. He moved toward the door, stopping only once beside me. Stay away from the west hallway tomorrow. I frowned. Why? His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Because if you accidentally hear the wrong conversation again, I may not be able to protect you twice. Then he opened the door and disappeared into the hallway, leaving me standing there in silence while the storm outside kept getting worse. I barely slept. Every sound inside the mansion kept dragging me awake again. Footsteps in distant hallways. Quiet voices behind walls. Doors opening and closing somewhere far below. By 3 o'clock in the morning, the storm had softened into steady rain, but the tension inside the house felt heavier than ever. I finally gave up pretending to rest sometime after sunrise. Pale gray light filtered through the giant windows while the fireplace burned low beside the bed. Vincent's jacket still rested across the chair near me like proof that none of this had been a dream. I changed into the clothes Evelyn left for me earlier. Soft black leggings. A cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Everything fit perfectly, which somehow unsettled me even more. Downstairs, the mansion looked completely different in daylight. Still beautiful. Still intimidating. But quieter now. Cleaner somehow. Like the party from last night had never happened at all. I followed the smell of coffee through the massive hallways until I found the kitchen near the back of the estate. It was bigger than my entire apartment. Marble countertops. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking rain-covered gardens. Staff moved quietly through the room preparing breakfast while pretending not to stare at me. I suddenly felt painfully out of place again. Evelyn stood near the espresso machine pouring coffee into porcelain cups. "Good morning, dear," she said warmly. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not really." She nodded like that answer did not surprise her. "Mr. Moretti is in a meeting." My stomach tightened automatically at the mention of him, which annoyed me more than it should have. I was not asking. Evelyn's mouth twitched slightly. No, but your face was. Before I could respond, voices echoed faintly somewhere deeper in the house. Male voices. Sharp. Tense. My eyes shifted instinctively toward the hallway leading west. The restricted wing. Vincent's warning from last night replayed immediately in my head. Stay away from the west hallway tomorrow. Which naturally made me want to know exactly what was hidden there. Curiosity gets people into trouble here, Evelyn said softly, without looking up from the coffee cups. I blinked. Was I that obvious? You are not trained to hide your thoughts the way people in this house are. That answer stayed with me longer than it should have. Around noon, the rain finally stopped. Weak sunlight pushed through the clouds outside, while staff quietly moved through the estate preparing for something else. Another meeting maybe. Another deal. Another secret conversation nobody wanted overheard. I tried calling the catering company twice to explain I would not be returning immediately, but both calls went straight to voicemail. Strange. By early afternoon, cabin fever started crawling beneath my skin. I hated feeling trapped. Hated not knowing what was happening around me. Mostly, I hated how calm Vincent stayed through all of it. Like he already knew exactly how this story would end. So eventually, I made a bad decision. I wandered. At first, only through the safe parts of the mansion. Library. Music room. Empty dining hall large enough to seat 50 people. Every room looked elegant enough for magazine covers, but none of them felt lived in. Vincent's presence lingered everywhere somehow despite him never being there physically. Controlled. Quiet. Watching. Eventually, without fully meaning to, I reached the west hallway. The atmosphere changed instantly there. Darker lighting. Fewer windows. Security cameras tucked discreetly into corners near locked doors. I should have turned around immediately. Instead, I kept walking slowly past framed black and white photographs lining the walls. Most showed older men standing beside younger versions of Vincent through different years of his life. Formal dinners, business meetings, private events. In every picture, Vincent looked exactly the same. Calm, guarded, untouchable. Then I saw the burned photograph. It sat partially hidden beneath another frame near the end of the corridor, smaller than the others, damaged around the edges by fire. My breath caught slightly as I leaned closer. A teenage Vincent stood beside a woman with dark hair and soft eyes. His arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders while she smiled directly at the camera. It was the first genuine smile I had seen on his face anywhere in the house. Something about that photo felt painfully human. Real. My fingers brushed the edge of the frame carefully. You were told not to come down here. The deep voice behind me nearly stopped my heart. I turned too fast. Vincent stood at the end of the hallway watching me with unreadable gray eyes. But this time, he did not look angry. Somehow that felt worse. For one terrifying second, neither of us moved. Vincent stood at the far end of the hallway dressed in a black button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, his gray eyes fixed on me with that same unreadable calm that somehow always made my heartbeat worse. I stepped away from the burned photograph instinctively. I was just looking around. Weak answer. We both knew it. Vincent glanced briefly toward the damaged frame before looking back at me. Most people in this house know how to follow instructions. Most people in this house seem afraid of you. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Silence settled heavily between us. I expected anger, coldness, maybe even for him to tell me to leave. Instead, Vincent slowly walked closer. Calm, controlled, dangerous in the quietest possible way. And you are not, he asked. I folded my arms tighter against myself automatically. I think I am trying to decide if I should be. Something shifted behind his eyes at that. Not irritation. Interest. And what is your conclusion so far? I hesitated. Because the truth was complicated. Vincent terrified me sometimes. Not because he threatened me. Because he did not. Men with power usually made sure you felt it immediately. Loud voices. Sharp tempers. Control disguised as confidence. Vincent never raised his voice. Never touched me without permission. Never tried to scare me. Somehow that made him harder to understand. I swallowed carefully. I think everyone here sees you as something dangerous. His expression did not change. But I glanced toward the burned photograph again before I could stop myself. Vincent noticed instantly. Of course he did. But I do not think dangerous people keep ruined family pictures. For the first time since meeting him, Vincent looked genuinely caught off guard. Just for a second. Tiny. Human. Then the walls slid back into place around him again. You notice details most people miss, he said quietly. Maybe because nobody usually notices me at all. The answer escaped before I could filter it. Vincent went still. The hallway suddenly felt smaller somehow. Closer. He studied me for a long moment beneath the dim lights before speaking again. That is not true. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Before I could answer, a sharp voice echoed from farther down the corridor. Vincent. Another man approached quickly from the far end of the hallway wearing a charcoal suit and an expression that instantly hardened when he saw me standing there. Early 40s maybe. Dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. Expensive watch. Colder eyes than Vincent somehow. We need to talk. His attention flicked toward me again. Disapproval obvious. Alone. Vincent did not even look away from me. It can wait. The man's jaw tightened slightly. This is exactly what I warned you about. Tension thickened instantly between them. I took a small step backward automatically. I should go. Vincent finally looked toward the other man then. Calm. Sharp. Adrian. Just one word, but something dangerous moved beneath it quietly. Adrian exhaled slowly through his nose before nodding once toward me. Miss Bennett. He turned and disappeared back down the hallway without another word. Silence lingered after he left. I looked at Vincent carefully. He does not like me. He does not trust coincidences. And you do? Vincent's gaze held mine steadily. No, honest again. Always honest in the strangest ways. I frowned slightly. Then why am I still here? He looked toward the burned photograph briefly before answering. Because every instinct I have says you are not part of this. That is comforting. It should not be. The answer came immediately. My pulse jumped again. Vincent stepped closer then. Not enough to corner me. Just enough that I could smell cedarwood and coffee lingering on his shirt. The people around me survive by assuming everyone has an angle, he said quietly. Everyone lies. Everyone wants something. His eyes stayed locked on mine. You walked into this house soaked from the rain, worried about overdue bills and your mother's medication. My breath caught completely. How do you know about my mom? Because I asked. I stared at him in disbelief. You investigated me? I protect what enters my house. The possessiveness hidden inside the sentence hit me harder than it should have. Before I could process it, Vincent's phone buzzed sharply in his pocket. His expression darkened slightly after reading the message. What happened? I asked softly. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Someone has been asking questions about you in Queens this morning. Every drop of warmth disappeared from my body instantly. Vincent's eyes lifted back to mine. Calm. Controlled. Protective in a way that suddenly felt terrifyingly real. You are not going home yet, Chloe. The drive into Manhattan started just after sunset. Rain still clung to the roads in silver streaks while the city lights reflected across the wet pavement like blurred stars. I sat in the back seat of a black SUV beside Vincent, trying very hard to ignore how unreal my life had become in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I had been arguing with my landlord about another late payment. Tonight, I was sitting beside one of the most powerful men in New York while two security vehicles followed behind us through traffic. Nobody spoke for the first 15 minutes. Soft jazz played quietly through the speakers while Vincent worked on his phone beside me, answering messages with calm efficiency. Even sitting still, he somehow controlled the atmosphere around him completely. You do not have to stare at the window every time you are nervous, he said suddenly without looking up. I turned immediately. I was not nervous. Another lie. My cheeks warmed slightly. You seem very confident for someone being followed by 3 SUVs. Vincent finally glanced toward me then. 4. I blinked. What? There is another vehicle behind the second intersection. He looked back down at his phone calmly. You missed it. A chill ran through me instantly. I turned toward the rear window carefully, but traffic lights and rain blurred everything together. Who are they? People trying to figure out why I canceled a private meeting because of a waitress from Queens. The words should not have affected me the way they did. But they did. I crossed my arms tighter against myself. You keep saying that like I did something wrong. Vincent slipped his phone back into his pocket slowly. I do not think you did anything wrong, Chloe. Then why does it feel like my life exploded overnight? For the first time all evening, something softened slightly in his expression. Because you accidentally walked into a world built on suspicion. Outside, the SUV slowed near a red light overlooking the East River. Manhattan glowed ahead of us beneath the storm clouds while reflections of neon signs rippled across wet streets below. Vincent studied me quietly for a second before speaking again. Do you trust me? The question caught me completely off guard. I stared at him. That is a complicated question. Why? I laughed once under my breath. Nervous. Because normal men do not ask people that while traveling in armed convoys. Something almost amused crossed his face again. Fair point. Silence settled briefly between us while the city moved outside the windows in soft blurred lights. Then Vincent reached into the inner pocket of his coat and held out a slim black envelope toward me. What is this? Open it. Slowly, I took the envelope from him. Inside was a folded document from my mother's rehabilitation clinic. My stomach dropped instantly when I saw the balance stamped across the top in red. Past due. I looked back at him sharply. Why do you have this? Vincent's gaze stayed steady. Because your mother missed 2 appointments last month. My throat tightened painfully. You investigated my family too? I investigated what matters to you. That is not normal. No, he agreed quietly. It is not. I stared down at the paperwork again, while embarrassment burned hot beneath my skin. I hated that he knew. Hated that he had seen the parts of my life I worked so hard to hold together quietly. I was going to pay it. I whispered automatically. Vincent's voice stayed calm. I know. Then why are you showing me this? He leaned back slightly against the leather seat while city lights moved across his face in shifting shadows. Because people become predictable when they are desperate. My chest tightened immediately. And you think I am desperate? I think you are exhausted. The honesty in his voice hurt more than judgment would have. You work 3 jobs. You skip meals to help your mother afford physical therapy. You sleep 4 hours a night and still apologize when your landlord calls because you are late on rent. His eyes held mine steadily. That is not weakness, Chloe. My throat burned unexpectedly. Nobody was supposed to notice those things. Nobody ever did. Vincent did. Which somehow terrified me more than all the security and expensive cars and whispered conversations combined. Before I could answer, the SUV suddenly slowed harder than before. One of the security vehicles ahead changed lanes sharply while voices crackled through earpieces near the driver. Vincent's expression shifted instantly, calm disappearing beneath something colder, sharper, protective. He reached across the seat without hesitation and gently pulled me closer beside him. Stay down for a minute. My pulse jumped violently. Vincent, what is happening? His eyes stayed fixed on the dark SUV now turning behind us through traffic. Someone just confirmed they are not following me tonight. His arm remained steady around me while the city lights blurred outside the windows faster now. They are following you. My heartbeat turned uneven instantly. What do you mean they are following me? Vincent did not answer right away. His attention stayed fixed on the dark SUV weaving carefully through traffic behind us while the driver accelerated onto the FDR drive. The city lights outside blurred faster now, reflecting across the wet windows in streaks of gold and white. One of the security men in the front seat spoke quietly into his earpiece, while another SUV moved closer beside us protectively. The atmosphere inside the vehicle changed completely. Tighter, sharper, real. Vincent's arm remained steady around me, keeping my head lowered slightly beneath the window line without making the gesture feel controlling. Somehow that made it worse. More intimate. More protective. Vincent, my voice came out softer this time. Tell me what is happening. His jaw tightened almost invisibly before he finally looked down at me. The men from last night believed you overheard sensitive information. I did not. I know. His eyes stayed calm despite the tension surrounding us. But now someone else is trying to confirm whether that is true. A cold knot formed in my stomach instantly. So what happens if they think I heard something? Silence. Just for half a second. But it was enough. Vincent, nothing is going to happen to you. The answer came too fast. Too controlled. Which meant he was worried. That realization hit me harder than fear somehow. I glanced toward the window carefully. The dark SUV stayed 3 cars behind us despite the changing lanes and heavy evening traffic. Who are those people? Vincent looked back toward the road ahead. Men who mistake fear for power. And you do not. The question slipped out before I could stop it. For the first time since the tension started building inside the car, something quieter crossed his expression. Not anger. Reflection. No, he said softly. I learned a long time ago that fear only makes people obedient. Never loyal. My chest tightened unexpectedly at the answer. Before I could say anything else, The lead security vehicle ahead suddenly changed direction sharply toward an underground parking entrance beneath a luxury hotel. Our SUV followed immediately. Tires rolled quickly down the concrete ramp while fluorescent lights flashed overhead in rapid intervals. The dark SUV behind us hesitated at the entrance for 1 second too long, then kept driving past. The entire car relaxed slightly afterward. Even the driver exhaled. Vincent's arm finally loosened around me, but he did not fully move away. "Are we safe now?" I asked quietly. For the moment. Not exactly comforting. The SUV stopped inside a private underground garage where 2 additional guards waited near a side elevator. Vincent stepped out first before offering me his hand automatically. I stared at it for a second before taking it. Warm fingers. Steady grip. Safe. The realization unsettled me immediately. Upstairs, the hotel suite looked even more expensive than the mansion somehow. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Soft lighting. White marble counters. Silence thick enough to hear my own breathing. Vincent loosened the collar of his black shirt while one of the guards quietly checked the rooms before leaving again. The second the door closed behind them, the silence shifted. Personal now. Dangerous in a completely different way. I wrapped my arms around myself instinctively. "You could have told me the truth sooner." Vincent turned toward me slowly. "About what?" "About how serious this actually is." He studied me carefully for a long moment. "You already looked overwhelmed." "Because I am overwhelmed." My voice cracked slightly despite trying to control it. "Yesterday, I was serving drinks at a catering job. Now people are following me through Manhattan because of conversations I never even heard." Vincent moved closer slowly. "Careful. Like approaching something fragile." "I know." "No, you do not." The frustration finally spilled out before I could stop it. "You live in this world." "I do not." "I do not know who to trust or why any of this is happening." Vincent stopped directly in front of me then, close enough that I could see exhaustion hidden beneath his calm expression for the first time all night. "Then trust me." The words landed heavily between us. Simple. Dangerous. Honest. I looked away first because holding his gaze suddenly felt impossible. "That is easy for you to say." "No," Vincent said quietly. "It is not." My pulse stumbled again. Slowly, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a small silver keycard before placing it gently into my hand. "What is this?" "Private elevator access." I frowned slightly. "Why are you giving me this?" His eyes held mine steadily. "Because if something happens tonight, I need you to be able to leave before anyone reaches this floor." Fear crawled coldly down my spine. "Vincent," he stepped even closer then, lowering his voice until it became almost intimate. "Listen to me carefully, Chloe." Every instinct in my body focused completely on him. "If anyone except me knocks on that door tonight," his jaw tightened slightly, "do not open it." I did not sleep again. Not really. The city stretched endlessly outside the hotel windows while Manhattan glowed beneath midnight rain and distant sirens echoed somewhere far below. Vincent stayed in the suite most of the night, though not with me exactly. He worked from the dining area near the windows with 2 phones spread across the table and quiet conversations passing constantly through his earpiece. Calm, focused, untouchable. But every once in a while, his eyes would lift toward me across the room like he was checking whether I was still there. Like he expected me to disappear if he looked away too long. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I finally gave up pretending to rest and walked quietly into the kitchen area, wearing the oversized sweater from the mansion and socks I found folded near the bed earlier. Vincent looked up immediately from his phone. "You should be asleep." "You keep saying that." I opened the refrigerator mostly to avoid looking directly at him. "I am starting to think you take sleep personally." A soft breath escaped him. Almost a laugh again. "You joke when you are anxious. And you notice too much." "That too." I grabbed a bottle of water before leaning against the counter across from him. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly against the giant windows while the city lights reflected across the polished marble floor. It should have felt awkward standing there in silence with a man I barely knew. Somehow it did not. "Why are you really helping me?" I asked quietly. Vincent's fingers stilled against the phone in his hand. "I already answered that." "No," I shook my head slightly. "You gave me practical reasons. Suspicion. Safety. Problems at your party." My eyes held as steadily. "I am asking about the real reason." The suite went completely silent after that. Vincent leaned back slowly in his chair, while studying me beneath the dim city light pouring through the windows. "Do you know what most people do when they meet me?" he asked finally. I frowned slightly. "What?" "They perform." My confusion must have shown because he continued quietly. "Politicians flatter me. Businessmen fear me. Women usually want something from me before I even learn their last name." There was no arrogance in his voice, just exhaustion. "Everyone calculates around me." My chest tightened unexpectedly. Vincent looked down briefly at the untouched whiskey glass near his hand before speaking again. "Then you walked into my house, carrying champagne with rainwater dripping from your sleeves, looking like you wanted to disappear into the walls." His eyes lifted back to mine. "You were the first honest thing in that room." I forgot how to breathe for half a second. The sincerity in his voice felt more dangerous than all the security guards and black SUVs combined. "Vincent," he stood slowly then, moving toward the windows overlooking Manhattan while keeping one hand inside his pocket. "You asked me why I am helping you." His reflection blurred against the rain-streaked glass. "That is why." Silence wrapped around us heavily after that. Somewhere below, headlights moved slowly through the wet streets while thunder rolled faintly across the city again. I stepped closer carefully. "You barely know me." Vincent turned slightly toward me. "I know enough." "Enough for what?" The question came out softer than I intended. His eyes held mine for a long second before he answered quietly. "Enough to know you do not belong anywhere near people like me." My throat tightened unexpectedly. And yet here I am. Something unreadable crossed his face at that. Almost regret. "Yes." Another silence settled between us. Closer this time. More personal. I became painfully aware of how near we were standing now. The warmth of him. The quiet steadiness in his expression. The fact that for the first time in almost 2 days, I no longer felt afraid standing beside him. Dangerous realization. Vincent noticed the shift immediately. Of course he did. His gaze dropped briefly toward my hand resting against the marble counter between us before lifting back to my face. "Chloe." Just my name. "Low. Careful." The way he said it made my pulse flutter unevenly again. Then suddenly his phone rang sharply across the suite, shattering the moment instantly. Vincent answered immediately, his expression darkening within seconds. "When?" Silence while he listened. "How long ago?" Every trace of warmth disappeared from the room. My stomach tightened automatically. Vincent ended the call slowly before looking at me with an expression I had never seen from him before. Not cold. Not controlled. Angry. "What happened?" I asked quietly. His jaw tightened hard enough that I saw the muscle move beneath his skin. "Someone tried entering your apartment tonight pretending to be building maintenance." Fear turned my blood cold instantly. Vincent's gray eyes locked onto mine with terrifying focus. "You are not safe in Queens anymore." The sun started rising over Manhattan an hour later. Pale gold light spilled slowly between the skyscrapers while rain clouds drifted apart above the city like the storm had finally exhausted itself overnight. I stood near the hotel windows wrapped in Vincent's black coat, watching the streets below come back to life one car at a time. Somewhere down there, people were buying coffee before work, complaining about subway delays, living normal lives. Mine no longer felt normal at all. Behind me, Vincent ended another quiet phone call before setting the device down on the marble counter harder than usual. Frustration. Controlled, but there. I turned slowly toward him. "My mother." The words caught slightly in my throat. "Is she safe?" Vincent nodded immediately. "I moved her before sunrise." I blinked. "You what?" "She is staying somewhere secure outside the city for a few days." My chest tightened instantly. "You moved my mother without asking me?" "I moved your mother because men pretending to be maintenance workers tried entering your apartment at 2 in the morning." His voice stayed calm, but exhaustion dragged beneath every word now. I was not going to gamble with her safety. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped, because I knew he was right. And somehow that scared me more than anything else. Vincent watched the realization settle across my face quietly. "You can hate me for making the decision," he said softly. "But she is safe." Silence stretched between us while morning light slowly filled the suite. For the first time since this nightmare started, I realized Vincent looked tired too. Really tired. His dark shirt sleeves were still rolled unevenly from the night before. Faint shadows rested beneath his eyes. He had probably not slept at all. Because of me. The thought landed heavily in my chest. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered again. Vincent looked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan before answering. Because this started in my house. That is not the real reason anymore. He stayed silent, which was answer enough. Slowly, I walked toward him across the quiet suite until only a few feet separated us. You could have walked away from this already. My voice softened. Most people would have. Vincent's eyes lifted to mine carefully. I am not most people. No, he definitely was not. The city glowed gold behind him now, soft morning light catching against the sharp lines of his face while silence wrapped around us again. But this silence felt different from the others. Less dangerous. More honest. You know what the crazy part is? I asked quietly. Vincent frowned slightly. What? I let out a nervous breath. I should probably be terrified of you. Something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. Probably. But I am not. The confession hung between us heavily. Vincent went completely still after that. Then slowly, carefully, he stepped closer. Not enough to overwhelm me. Just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him again. That may be the first reckless decision you have made since meeting me. A small laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Real this time. Vincent's expression softened instantly when he heard it. There it was again. That impossible shift only I seemed to witness. The version of him nobody else in the city probably ever saw. Not the feared man from whispered conversations. Not the cold strategist everyone obeyed. Just Vincent. Tired. Guarded. Human underneath all the armor. My eyes drifted briefly toward the skyline outside the windows. Everything in my life changed because I picked up one catering shift. Vincent followed my gaze toward the city slowly. No, his voice came quieter now. More personal than before. Everything changed because you walked into a room full of people pretending to be someone they were not. His eyes returned to mine steadily. And somehow stayed yourself anyway. My heartbeat stumbled again. Outside, sunlight finally broke fully across Manhattan, turning the wet streets gold beneath the morning sky. Vincent reached for the coat resting around my shoulders then, adjusting it gently like he could not help himself. His fingers brushed my sleeve once before falling away. You came looking for a paycheck that night, Chloe. The city glowed behind him while his gray eyes held mine completely, and somehow became the only honest thing left in my world.